Are you looking to grow your dental practice and attract top-tier new patients? Discover the potential of digital marketing with a personalized strategy session. Join Lila Stone, the marketing director at Equa, for an exclusive 90-minute consultation. Lila and her team will dedicate 6 hours before your meeting to create a customized marketing plan specifically for your practice. This valuable opportunity is free of charge and comes with no commitments. Visit www.insuranceuntangledorg/MSM to schedule your meeting with Lila today. You'll also receive a free analysis report so you can start transforming your practice through the power of digital marketing.
You are now listening to another episode of the Insurance Untangled Podcast, where we explore the various challenges faced by dental practices due to their reliance on insurance. Join us in this podcast as we dive deep into the issues surrounding dental insurance dependence and offer practical solutions and strategies to help you take control of your practice's financial future.
We spend a lot of time on this podcast talking about the gears of a practice, insurance, billing, the hard numbers. But today we're talking about the soul of the business, the patient experience. Every office says that they are patient-centered. It's on every website, every business card. But if we're being honest, most practices are actually new patient-centered. They spend a fortune on ads to get people in, but then they let the patients they already have slip away because the day-to-day experience is, just okay. Welcome back to the Insurance Untangled Podcast, where we help dentists turn insurance struggles into growth opportunities by breaking free from PPO limits. I'm your host, Don Adeesha, and it's great to have you with us. Now, joining us to fix the patient experience problem is none other than Kelly Fox-Galvagni. Kelly has spent several years in the trenches helping dental teams realize that experience isn't just a soft skill. It's actually the most powerful growth engine you have. This episode is brought to you by Equa Marketing, the digital growth partner behind this podcast, and a trusted resource for dental practices looking to break free from PPOs. Kelly, thanks for being here with us, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Don. Great to be back. How are you?
Great to have you here. And I'm doing great now that we are going into discussion about patient experience. I love to always learn. So, yeah. Now, Kelly, everyone says they care about the patient experience, right? But it means something different to almost every practice.
So true.
So when you walk into a practice, what does a genuinely great patient experience actually look like, and where do most practices fall short?
Okay, we're coming out of the gate strong here, Don. I love it. Such a great question. So a great patient experience is consistency. A great patient experience doesn't mean that there's one little wow moment followed by average everything else. A great patient experience means that everybody on the team knows their role. They have absolute clarity of their practice's vision, culture, philosophy, core values. Yes, all of those things matter. If there's a mission statement on your website, you have to be trying to really deliver whatever that says to those patients. Patients may have read that. They may have chosen you out of all of the choices on Google because of that mission. So the consistency of the team members, the doctors as well, but every single member of the team really living and breathing the practice philosophy and that standard of exceptional care. And as you said, it means many different things to many different practices. I'm not going to judge what's the best patient experience. That's unique to every practice. But whatever your ideal is, it must be consistent. So most practices fall short at the handoff, right? So we call this our baton. We like to use a little visual imagery here. So with the baton, imagining that our patient is a baton like in an Olympic relay race, right? So everybody knows how that works. The runners are going to pass the baton. You can't drop the baton. That's really bad. And there's a lot of grace and synergy that happens with this, right? So we should be thinking about this with our dental teams as well. So imagine a patient steps into your practice and they come into the reception room. And I would say 95% of dental practices get this part really right. As soon as the patient enters, the baton enters the reception room, somebody from the administrative team, 95% of the time, greets that patient warmly. And so now that baton is in the care and possession of that administrative team, right? And so again, 95% of the time, those administrative team members, if the practice is running late, if the patient arrived very early, if there's forms that need to be filled out, 95% of the time, that administrative team does a really good job keeping that baton safe and informed, right? You agree, Don? And then
95% of the time.
95%, that one's pretty easy, right? So then what happens next is a member of the clinical team, it might be a dental assistant, it might be a dental hygienist, in some practices, it might even be the doctor, is going to come to the doorway of that reception area where that baton has been held safely and securely by the administrative team, and they're going to come and they're going to get that baton pass. And I would say a large number of practices rather, the majority of practices also do that transfer very well, that handoff.
Okay.
It starts to get a little dicey from there. That baton now comes back into the clinical space. And sometimes patients aren't really guided as smoothly or as nicely as they could be to the operatory. Sometimes they're a little bit like, somebody's walking in front of them, but they're not really, or they're walking behind them and they're not really giving them clear instructions. They're calling out the numbers of the rooms, but there's no labels on the doorway. So how would the patient know? So there's a lot of room for improvement in that. As simple as it sounds, we do see that create a lot of unnecessary anxiety and sort of failure of customer service just in that simplicity of taking a patient basically down a hallway, right? So then that patient gets into the care space, the operatory, the treatment room, whatever you prefer to call it, and it starts to get even more sketchy here now. So we would hope that the clinical team member and a doctor or a hygienist, they're going to stay with that patient now for the duration until it's time to pass that baton off, right? Doesn't always happen. How often, ask yourselves, listeners, how often does that patient get left alone? How often does that patient get moved from one room to another because they were actually seated in a room where something wasn't there or something didn't work or it's not the right spot for that particular procedure? All of these little hiccups impact the patient experience so drastically. And it's memorable. The patients don't forget it. And so lastly, and the place where we see the worst baton handoff is when, even if that clinical visit goes really smoothly, let's assume that somebody did stay in the room, the clinical procedure was great, patient didn't feel the injection, they're happy with the outcome, rah, rah, rah. Now that patient needs to be brought back up to admin. So many times we see patients stand up at the end of the visit, walk out into the hallway completely dazed and confused. They're not really sure where they are. They kind of look like a deer in the headlights. They're not sure where to go. And they're kind of left like set free, right? To get themselves back up to the administrative area. And so many times when we observe this as coaches, it really looks like the baton gets thrown down the hallway at the back of the administrator's head. And so sometimes if we have a really savvy administrative team, they can like reach up and grab that baton. They get lucky. Sometimes that baton rolls right past the administrative desk, right out the door. And so the biggest breakdown that we see is in that baton, in that handoff, which every member of the team plays a role in. And we've got to pay attention to it.
I love that. I was just taking notes on each time you were passing it down the road and how it kept on multiplying or the previous problem, right? Especially when you're in the operatory and you're just sitting there as a patient, you don't know what's going to happen. And of course, most of the time, this we all know, we're not that excited to go to the dentist when we have to go to the dentist. And we're a bit scared about the drills, all that's going to happen. And now you're just sitting there all alone, surrounded by all this wonderful metal, and just waiting
Scary
for
stuff. There's a lot of really scary looking stuff. I mean, not to me as a dental professional, but to dental patients, lay people, there's a lot of really scary looking stuff in those rooms. That's just heightening that anxiety for no reason.
So can you give us a quick tip on how to make that part, particularly that part, more inviting? Because
Once the patient gets into the care space, once they're in the operatory,
yes,
for sure.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things, and we could do a whole nother podcast on infection control and things. So we need to be careful to make sure that everything is still safely packaged, but when the patient is seated. So really, there's no reason for someone to run out of the room because there's
Mm,
actually some setup now that needs to happen in the presence of the patient. So,
mm,
simple things from putting on the patient napkin to opening up the packages as appropriate, to having a conversation with the patient, reviewing their health history, possibly taking their blood pressure. Obviously, the relationship, the conversation. How about a little bit of small talk and remembering things about the patient? How about making sure the patient's absolutely clear on what they should expect in today's visit? Are there any post-op instructions that we could start to give in advance? Let's say, I'm a dental assistant for 37 years. If I'm in the room and I know my doctor's not going to come in right away, I could start going over some of the things the patient could expect before the procedure even begins, right? So there are
mm.
so many things we could be doing with that time that means we're not going to run out of the room and leave the patient alone. I taught dental assisting for a long time. I'm still very passionate about our dental assistants. I think they're amazing. They're the heartbeat of every practice. When I train dental assistants, I always say if you're a chairside assistant, the hallway is lava. If you have a patient seated, you should not be in the hallway under any circumstance. So that's just a mindset. And again, it's however the practice has the bar set. If your
Mm.
patient experience is that we are totally patient centered, as you said in your open, Don, if you're truly patient centered, your patients are not left alone. That's not patient centricity.
There
So
we go.
people can try to manipulate the words and redefine things, but if we want to be clear, you have to set a standard and then hold everybody on your team to that standard.
Appreciate that, Kelly. Now, a lot of practices obsess over getting new patients in the door, right? But
For sure.
they're losing probably their, own patients out the back. And why does retention get overlooked, and what's it costing a practice that really doesn't pay attention to it?
So there's a lot of things that are impacting this right now. Number one is, like when a new patient calls, you know it. So there's like a certain level of awareness from new patients
Mhm.
coming in. If a patient quietly slips out, you don't hear it, you don't see it, you don't feel it. So it's easy to miss. By the time somebody thinks to run a report to figure it out, it's a huge problem. There's not just one patient that left. We find that there's been basically a mass exodus of patients, right? So I think a lot of what we're challenged with right now, even 6 years after the COVID pandemic, is that COVID created a false sense of momentum in so many dental practices, and it created such a backlog of in the hygiene schedules for sure that many practices literally turned off their recall systems because they had
Mhm.
nowhere to put people. And
Mhm.
so I'm finding as I go out and I meet new potential clients to coach, so many practices 6 years later have still not really turned their recall system back on. It's like haphazard. They're doing text messages through their patient communication, and there's a lot of automation involved, but there's really nobody, a human monitoring it or kind of keeping their finger on the pulse of what's happening. And so recall and reactivation should be running concurrently, right? And this is like an old school way of thinking. 20
Mhm.
years ago, if a doctor was going on vacation and the team was allowed to work some hours while the doctor wasn't present, we would do a reactivation campaign. We would go through,
Mhm.
if we still had paper charts, we would go through the charts and we would call a bunch of people that haven't been there because their sticker was really old on their paper chart, or we'd pull a report out of our computer software and we would try to bring back people. But we would do it just for that 1 week and then we wouldn't revisit it again for maybe a year or 2 years. That is completely ineffective in today's world. So all of your patients that do not have a scheduled hygiene appointment from 0 to 17 months are recall. Once they hit the 18-month mark, they have technically slipped into inactivation, whether your practice management software says it or not. So now we
Mhm.
have to treat them a little bit differently. So these
Okay.
two programs run concurrently. 0 to 17 months is recall, 18 months to 36 months is reactivation. It's very soft, very consistent in the recall phase. In the reactivation phase, it becomes a bit more assertive, even borderline aggressive, right? So there was a study done by the Harvard Business Review. They quoted Bain and Company, and they figured out that it is actually 5 times more costly to acquire a new patient than it is to retain one that you already have. So, doesn't it make sense, practices, to really look carefully and critically at what your recall system even is, and does it include reactivation? And I'm going to make a really bold statement and say a lot of the listeners, if they really look at that and they're honest about it, they're going to identify a massive problem. Their front door is wide open. They are ready, willing, and able to receive as many new patients as possible, but very sadly, and sometimes surprisingly for practice owners, the back door is open even wider.
Now, can you give us a quick script, perhaps, on what an ideal recall would sound like, and also a reactivation call?
For sure, for sure. So when a patient is just like slightly overdue for hygiene, perhaps they even had a hygiene appointment and they broke it, so now they're, in that 0 to 12-month range. It's not drastic yet. They've missed 1 or 2 or 3 hygiene visits, but it's not drastic. We want to make it feel like they're the only person we're thinking of. If we're truly patient-centric, we never admit that we're calling off of a list. We never admit that we're trying to fill our schedule. We only talk about the fact that we thought of you today. So, if I'm lucky enough to get you on the phone, Don, which I may not be, because you know how hard it is to get people on the phone these days, but if I'm lucky enough to get you, I may say something like, Don, this is Kelly calling from Mr. Wonderful's dental practice. This morning in your morning huddle, doctor thought of you. He asked me to pull your chart, and we realized we haven't seen you in almost a year. So concerned about you, wondering if everything is okay. Doctor asked if you'd give a call back. That's it. It's really mysterious, and it's totally patient-centered. I have like a massive news flash for everybody that is tasked with the extremely daunting and challenging job of phone calls for reactivation. It's a tough, tough gig, ladies and gentlemen. That I will not deny. But here's a news flash. Nobody wants to be called off of your list. Nobody wants to help you fill your schedule. That is, nobody wants to hear that they're overdue. That is totally dull and not compelling, and definitely not patient-centric. So, if we were calling for reactivation and we haven't been calling, the first that we need to apologize, Don. We need to say, we realize it's kind of the same opening, and then we have to really suck it up and say, Don, I'm so sorry. We didn't realize sooner that we haven't seen you. How have you been? And so many times, these people have a story. They've been through some stuff. Life is tough these days. People have a lot going on. They did not avoid you because they didn't want to pay their $25 broken appointment fee. They did not avoid you because you did anything wrong, per se. They've just had stuff. They've had life. And how are we patient-centric if we're not even noticing and caring that these people have had obstacles that have prevented them from coming in? And so many times they're so grateful for the persistence, and they'll say things like, I so appreciate that you kept after me and you kept calling. I had so much going on. I meant to call back, and I know I should have been there. I just had too many other things. Thank you for not forgetting about me. Patients will start to say things like that.
When you're doing these reactivation programs, Kelly, I was just wondering, when do you say it's a lost cause? Do you ever give up?
Yeah, so if we've made multiple attempts, right? So the phones are one, for sure. Our patient communication systems play a huge role in this. Sending out those automated texts, it's a great advantage. It's a great addition to what we should be doing. Sometimes, depending on patient demographics, we'll even throw some snail mail in there. And we'll see, like, did we get a bounce back on the address? Maybe the patient moved and they're really just not responding because they don't even live in the town anymore. There's a lot of reasons why people fall off the grid, right? So we have a recall reactivation program that pretty much lays out a framework. It's a little complicated to explain right now, but I'm happy to share it if anybody wants it. I'm sure they can get in touch with you to get it from me. But basically, your practice should have a cutoff of a number of attempts, but the number of attempts has to be within a short duration. Because if too much time passes in between the attempts, it's as if you didn't make a touch at all. So that's kind of the magic of it, is the persistence. I can't emphasize that enough, how persistent we need to be. And you cannot feel like you're stalking them. If you really care, like if you had a friend, like everybody on the podcast, think about this. If you had a friend that was always a good friend to you, maybe not somebody that you saw every single day, but somebody that you saw a few times a year, and then all of a sudden you realize you haven't been seeing them, and you try reaching out to them and they're not calling you back, would you just give up because you would feel like a stalker, or would you be persistent? Right?
You should.
So if we're really patient-centric and we really care about our people, we have to be persistent. That's how you show you care.
Being persistent. Yeah, that was a great explanation. I really appreciated the differentiating between recall, reactivation, and showing us the exact, merits of each. Yeah, I mean, we are really lucky to get people through the door, and we are lucky to get people on a call. So when you said that the doctor thought of you, I was just thinking to myself, if someone just says that, and I just got my cleaning done yesterday, and if I get that call, I might go up tomorrow too, just to see, why did the doctor think of me? Well,
Right. And of course, when the patient calls back and the patient says the doctor wants to talk to me, the team is so equipped to say, "Oh my goodness, Don, we are so glad to hear from you. Doctor is going to be delighted that you called back. She's with a patient right now. She's going to be so happy that you called. How have you been?" And let the patient tell their story, why we haven't seen them. If they say everything is okay, then go right into, "It's been a while since we've seen you, Don. I'm sure a doctor would love to speak with you in person. Can I help you schedule your appointment? You haven't been here in such a long time."
You did something very interesting there. You took the trust that we have in the doctor, like the highest authoritative person in the practice, but you used it and framed it in the frameworks of like an administrator, right? Because usually what we have a problem with is like, as an admin person trying to call up and just putting yourself, okay, we did the list, we found that you were overdue. You're telling them the exact reality of the situation, but you switched it up completely into a story that is coming from a more branded perspective.
It's not for everybody. I know there are some practices this would not be their value system. This would not align with them, and that's perfectly okay. But if practices are looking to differentiate, if practices are really trying to get their finger on the pulse of why their hygiene schedule looks like Swiss cheese every single day, these are some of the things that we see to be highly effective.
Amazing. Now, we're going to take a pause here. If you're listening to this and thinking we honestly don't know how many patients we're losing or why they're not coming back, that's worth paying attention to. And Insurance Untangled offers a free practice marketing audit specifically to help practices answer that question. Book your free session using insuranceuntangledcom/MSM. That's insuranceuntangledcom/MSM. Let's get back to the conversation. So, Kelly, what are the moments in the patient journey that matters most for retention? The touch points where practice either earns loyalty or loses it? And what can a team start doing differently tomorrow?
So I think that it's the gap between what the practice promises and what the patient actually experiences, right? There are so many touch points that connect to this, and I'll give a couple of examples, but the number of times that a clinical team member, and again, this is not the team members doing, this is the structure, the framework, the expectation in a particular practice, but I see it so often and it's mind-boggling. Clinical team member tells a patient that just had a crown prep or a scan or impression for something that's going to go out for lab work. They tell the patient, your crown will be back in 2 weeks. The patient walks up to the administrative team. The baton gets thrown at the administrator's head. The patient gets up there and the patient says, they told me my crown's coming back in 2 weeks. So that patient expects an appointment in exactly 2 weeks. And lo and behold, the administrator will likely make it for them in exactly 2 weeks. Here's the scary part. A lot of our dental practices know that the labs are really running slow. They have staffing issues. They have a lot of client load. They're not running timely. It's taking a lot of good labs a longer time. And I see that, right? And a lot of these practices, they don't want to switch to another lab. I respect it. But so why would we set this up for failure? So now what's going to happen is that patient is going to make that appointment in exactly 2 weeks. Maybe that even means they're going to take time off from work. They're going to make some other adjustments so they can be there in exactly 2 weeks. They're going to confirm their appointment via text. And then the practice is going to call that patient the morning of their appointment and say, oh, I'm so sorry, we have to reschedule your appointment. The lab messed up and your crown's not going to be back. The patient doesn't hear the lab messed up. The patient thinks, and rightfully so, you messed up. Why did you tell me that the crown would be back? And then not only did you tell me that the crown would be back, you didn't think a couple of days ahead of time to check to make sure the crown would be back before you confirmed my appointment. And so now my schedule and my most precious commodity, my time, has to be impacted because you're too unorganized and irresponsible to value my time. So that's one example of completely overpromising and underdelivering. And it's a really bad move. Another one is administrative team members, again, not the fault of the administrative team members. They haven't been given a clear pathway and a clear workflow of how to juggle multiple tasks at one time. That administrative workflow is so grossly undertrained in our profession. Those administrators are taking so much incoming information at one time that it's very hard to categorize it and prioritize it, and they're not given adequate training so many times. So we often see examples where administrators, meaning only the best, have 2 patients stacked up waiting to check out, 3 lines are ringing, and somebody else calls in. They tell one of the lines that they pick up that they have to call them back. And they might say something like, oh, Mrs. Jones, can I call you back in a few minutes? And the patient says, sure. And they hang up. And then they get down the rabbit hole with 100 other tasks. And we're lucky if that patient gets called back by the end of the day. Maybe tomorrow somebody will remember that we never called Mrs. Jones back. Maybe Mrs. Jones is going to call us back in a week or two, and she's not going to be a happy patient. She's not a raving fan. And so if you are looking for new patient referrals, right, our best new patients are new patients that come from other patients. And so how likely is it for Mrs. Jones, who may really love your practice, she really may, how likely is it that she will refer more people to you if you have already demonstrated to her that you're too busy to take good care of the patients that you already have? What's the likelihood of her sending you more patients? That would be self-sabotage for her.
Absolutely.
Right? So all of these examples of dropping the ball and not connecting the dots, we do ourselves such a better service as healthcare professionals and certainly practice owners if we can underpromise and overdeliver. Make sure that the team is empowered to stop making promises that we cannot keep. And create systems, workflows in every department in your practice that allows the cycle of follow through. And that's not expecting people, for all of the practice managers and the owners and people in leadership positions that are on this podcast, that's not for people to critically think in their own head, ladies and gentlemen. That is systems that have been established by your business for people to follow. That's how we get the best out of our people. When we give them clarity of expectations and we give them a workflow and a framework that is tangible and doable so that they don't miss the mark. And
Right.
that's, and there's honestly, Don, probably 200 other examples like that I could come up with, but we only have a short amount of time.
We do. And but this is great. I love the example. And while you were, presenting that example, I was getting frustrated just listening to it. Because if
Right?
someone tells me, my crown's gonna be there in 2 weeks, I expect it to be there in 2 weeks. But if you tell me it's 3 weeks, I'll expect it in three.
Fine. That's fine, right? I mean, what do I know? I'm just a
Yeah.
patient. I'm
Yeah.
following your lead. You're the professional.
Yeah. Let me know in advance. That's it, just so that I can plan ahead, what I'm going to do about it. How might I plan my finances around it? That's the main concern, really.
Right? The
Yeah,
time and the
and
finances, right? And those things
yeah,
are sometimes very tightly tied.
exactly.
If a patient is already concerned about finances and now they've rearranged their work schedule where they generate the income to pay for the treatment that you want to do for them, and where they many, many times they earn the benefits that they use to pay for some of the treatment that you do for them, and now you've impacted that work schedule, that's a really bad move. That's not good
Yeah,
business.
yeah. And I was just thinking, for this time around, I might get the crown done, with this particular dental office. But then I'm not going back there ever again. Like, the moment you said the lab messed up, I'm thinking, oh, wow, they are passing accountability and, just not even owning up to it. Why? Like, I got options, right?
It's not
It's,
exactly. It's not 5 star. It's not 5 star Google review worthy. It's not send a friend worthy. It's not any of that. And
yeah,
so, when we're looking at patient retention and patient to patient referrals, we have to be so critical in the way that we review ourselves.
mhm. Appreciate that, Kelly. I mean, yeah, I'm glad you said, that was a completely over the top example because I'm thinking like if that was a real case, which I
It
unfortunately,
happens, Don. I'm here to tell you, I'm in 40, 50 dental practices a month. And when we first start coaching practices, these are not one-offs. These are things that happen. And I'm very fortunate and blessed. I work with a lot of great practices, but a lot of them have very broken down systems. And systems run the practice, right? And people run the system. So if your systems don't support where you're trying to go, your people will fail.
check. Appreciate that. Now, when a practice truly commits to the patient experience, what changes? How does it show up in retention, referrals, and long-term growth? And what does that transformation look like over time?
So we sort of touched on this a little bit, right? It's like that patient who was told she was going to get a call back in a little bit and she didn't get one. When the patient experience deteriorates, the first thing that we see is no patient to patient referrals. Then we'll see we go from getting really beautiful stories in our Google reviews to just getting 5 stars or just getting, oh, everybody's nice, just very generic, not really meaningful. And you see it like fade away. And too many practices don't pay enough attention to that. Too many practices say, oh, we're not getting enough new patients because our marketing company isn't doing XYZ, or a big office opened up down the road, they're stealing all of our new patients. They make excuses and they don't spend enough time being self-critical and really asking themselves, hey, this is like my antenna is up. Why is this happening? Is there something that we're doing that's missing? And I think the thing that is the most traumatizing, I'm almost going to say, to practice owners, is the reality of a principle that we teach to all of our clients. And I love to teach on podcasts like this. It's a business principle. So as much as we are healthcare and we're all about the people and we're all about health and all that fun stuff, dentistry is a business, right? Undisputable. So business principles do apply to a dental practice. That is 100% true. So there is a principle of business called the price service quality triangle. And it is 100% true that no matter what business you are in, you cannot have consistently low price, high and consistently high service and consistently high quality. It is an impossibility. It cannot be done. It has never been done. I challenge you guys to show me a business that has done it. It's not doable. So this is the issue in dentistry. If you are contracted to take low fees, that might be your model, and you may be very happy in that lane, and that may serve you and your community extremely well. No judgment. But the reality is your fees are very low. So now you've got one dedicated side of that triangle. You can only have two, never three. So I hope that most of our listeners are going to pick high quality, meaning clinical quality, as the second side of the triangle, right? So that means that no matter how badly you want it, you do not have the highest service. You might not have poor service, but you do not have the highest service. It's impossible. So you have to be honest about that. Otherwise, you're forever chasing your tail, trying to accomplish something that you can't even do. And there's no shame in that game, by the way. You can deliver a very good experience to your patients with only two sides of the triangle, no matter what two sides you pick. But be honest about it. Stop trying to do something that is impossible. You're going to remain in a constant state of frustration, and your patients will never really know who you are. You cannot be everything to everyone. So clarity in your message, clarity in who you're trying to attract. I mean, that's one of the biggest things with marketing is what is it that you're trying to attract? Not every new patient is the right fit for every practice. That's the cold, hard truth of it. Would we like to try to see if they fit? Sure, we would. But we would be a lot smarter in our marketing, especially our internal marketing, if we only target people that we believe are a good fit, right? So that price, service, quality triangle is pure gold. And it's something that should never be overlooked. And there, like I said, it's not meant to judge practices that are locked into a lower fee structure. That it's not judgment based whatsoever. You may have, the highest fees on the planet. That's great. You're not on the low side. So now you can also have high service and high quality. The triangle can work in all of the directions, and it can work really well. And you can run a beautiful practice, a profitable practice, and have a strong team culture and all of the things. But you just have to be clear and honest about it.
Okay. Self-critical. It's pretty tough to do that. Do you have any tips on how to get to a stage where we can really self-reflect before we even start reflecting on the practice itself ourselves? And just where can we start? Where have you seen like real transformations from the practice owners start?
It's an interesting phenomenon to sometimes invite in, maybe you have a newer team member and extended members of their family are not patients yet. And they don't have a strong position on the practice like your team that's been with you for, your work family and their family. They know you, right? So they're willing to accept you probably with all of your flaws. But if you have a newer team member, that's a great opportunity to invite someone in for a new patient experience who can be a little bit impartial and, invite them in. Maybe they're going to get a discount on their services to be a secret shopper for you and to be honest and truthful with you and tell you what they like and what they don't like. And, critique that there were fingerprints on the glass door when they came in, critique that the restroom wastebasket was overflowing, critique that there's water spots on the ceiling tiles and it's really gross to look up at that, or there's bugs in the fluorescent lights. I mean, these are the things, if you all look around your practices, the things that we become desensitized to because we see them every day are massive. When I go into a practice to observe, I come up with a list inevitably, even in completely gorgeous facilities, I can come up with no less than 25 things that a patient may look at and go, I'm not sure about that. That doesn't really look 5-star. That doesn't look that clean. I don't think I like the way they said that. I don't know. Was that a HIPAA violation? I'm not sure. Like, you really have to put yourself in the five senses of the patient and put yourself in the chairs. Sit in your reception room while there are patients out there. Sit in the reception room where there are no patients out there and listen to what goes on with admin when they think nobody's listening. Put yourself back in a patient chair in a care space and look around, see what you see. Listen to what you hear in the hallway, what you hear in the sterilization area. It's amazing the acoustics in a dental practice with all the white noise we have with our ultrasonics and our cavitrons and our compressors and suctions and all the different things. It is amazing how the acoustics travel in a dental practice. And if we're not really mindful about what we talk about, the tone in which we say it, the patient centricity of the words that we use, patients will often hear fragments of conversations that were not intended to them, and they will build an entire context around them that is not good. So being self-critical really means being vulnerable enough to say, would I think that this was 5-star? Let me put myself through the process really like a patient. And then be bold enough
Amazing.
to change it if it's not good, right?
Amazing. Because at the end of the day, when you put yourself as that secret shopper, as that patient, it might be difficult to really digest if you would even go back to your own practice as a patient.
Right.
Um, as you mentioned, just that little gossip here and there, it might it might be doing more marketing than you ever know, right?
Mhm.
Like your billboards, your signs out there, your ad spends, all gone out the door just because, one of your team members was talking about this and that.
Oh my goodness.
And
The conversations that team members tend to have sometimes when they think nobody can hear them, it's not always so rosy. It's not always appropriate. And it's not because they're trying to do a bad thing. It's human nature, especially if you have a team that's very connected and they're very intertwined in each other's lives. They like to share and it's a beautiful thing. We encourage those relationships. But again, if you've got a patient that you've left alone in an operatory, in the supine position and they're uncomfortable, they're looking around, there's all this crazy stuff, it smells weird, it sounds weird, and now they get to hear somebody's conversation, they're going to listen to it. And if they only hear part of it, they're going to create their own story.
yeah. And when you're in that position, your senses are almost heightened to a next level.
For sure, Don. I say that all the time. I always say that our patients have like superpower hearing. Once they get into those operatories, something really weird happens with their hearing, and they become like this superpower that can hear anything, anywhere, even with all the white noise. Somehow they do it.
They do it. So to wrap up the podcast here, Kelly, what is our golden take from this conversation? If our listeners could only take away one thing, what would it be?
It's got to be consistency. Be consistent with your expectations. Be consistent with your clarity from your team, from yourself of what you want. What do you believe in? What is your practice vision? What are you trying to attract? And then do the work. Be self-critical. But it's the consistency in all of those things. You can't write your vision once and then never review it again for 5 years. You've got to consistently look at that vision and see if it's working for you. If you've provided clarity to your team, but now you've had some team turnover or you've implemented a new piece of technology, you've got to revise that clarity. There's too many times doctors are well-intended, practice owners are well-intended. They've done some of the things, but then too much time goes by and they haven't revisited it. And that's where it lacks that consistency.
Consistency. Um, Kelly, how can the people get in touch with you and your work?
I would love for people to meet me on my website. It's www.smilepotential.com. That's www.smilepotential.com. And there's an opportunity there to schedule a complimentary 30-minute coaching call with me. And it's a fun little game we play called Ask the Coach Anything. You can ask me any question, and I'm happy to give you all my best tips and tricks for that one or two things, whatever we can fit in 30 minutes. If you talk fast like me, we can get a lot done in 30 minutes.
Check. Right. So thank you very much, Kelly Fox-Galvagni, for that wonderful conversation on the patient experience.
Thank you so much, Don. It's a great joy for me to chat about this stuff with you. Your questions are always so on point, and I think really top of mind for everybody. These are all things that so many practices are being impacted with and by, and there's ways to do it better. So it's just a matter of having the courage to do it and be consistent.
Inconsistent. Now, to our listeners, a quick reminder, if you want to see exactly where your practice stands, go to insuranceuntangledcom/resources to grab the guide for this episode, or go ahead, book that free audit at insuranceuntangledcom/MSM. That's insuranceuntangledcom/MSM for your free marketing strategy meeting. Don't just listen to this and nod your head. Actually, go change one thing in your lobby tomorrow. We'll see you on the next episode. Don Adeesha signing off for this one. Take care.